The Khazars, Turkish, Hazarlar, Tatar, Xäzärlär, Hebrew, Kuzarim, Arabic, Khazar, Russian, Persian, Greek, Chi Zeta Alpha Rho Omicron Iota, Latin, Gazari/Cosri/Gasani, were a semi-nomadic Turkic people who created what for its duration was the most powerful polity to emerge from the breakup of the Western Turkish steppe empire, known as the Khazar Khanate or Khazaria. Astride, a major artery of commerce between northern Europe and southwestern Asia, Khazaria became one of the foremost trading emporia of the medieval world, commanding the western marches of the Silk Road and played a key commercial role as a crossroad between China, the Middle East, and Kievan Rus. For some 3 centuries, c. 659–65, the Khazars dominated the vast area extending from the Volga-Don steppes to the eastern Crimea and the northern Caucasus. Khazaria long served as a buffer state between the Byzantine Empire and both the nomads of the northern steppes and the Umayyad Empire, after serving as Byzantium's proxy against the Sasanian Persian Empire. The alliance was dropped around 900. Byzantium began to encourage the Alans to attack Khazaria and weaken its hold on Crimea and the Caucasus, while seeking to obtain an entente with the rising Rus power to the north, which it aspired to convert to Christianity. Between 965 and 969, the Kievan Rus ruler Sviatoslav of Kiev conquered the capital Atil and destroyed the Khazar state. Beginning in the 8th century, Khazar royalty and notable segments of the aristocracy converted to Judaism. The populace appears to have been multi-confessional, a mosaic of pagan, Tengrist, Jewish, Christian and Muslim worshippers and polyethnic. Khazar origins for, or suggestions Khazars were absorbed by many peoples, have been made regarding the Slavic Judaizing Subotniks, the Bukharan Jews, the Muslim Kumyks, Kazakhs, Nogais, the Cossacks of the Don region, the Turkic-speaking Krimchaks and their Crimean neighbors the Karaites to the Moldavian Ksangos, the Mountain Jews and others. A modern theory, that the core of Ashkenazi Jewry emerged from a hypothetical Khazarian Jewish diaspora, is now viewed with skepticism by most scholars, but occasionally supported by others. This Khazarian hypothesis is sometimes associated with anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. Giola Nemeth, following Zoltan Gombash, derived Xäzär from a hypothetical asterisk Khazar reflecting a Turkic root Kaz, to ramble, to roam, being an hypothetical velar variant of common Turkic Kes. With the publication of the fragmentary Tez and Turkin inscriptions of the Uyghur Empire, 744–840, where the form Khazar is attested, though uncertainty remains whether this represents a personal or tribal name, gradually other hypotheses emerged. Louis Bazin derived it from Turkic Kaz, tyrannize, oppress, terrorize, on the basis of its phonetic similarity to the Uyghur tribal name, Khazar. Andrus Ronatas connects it with Khazar, the Pahlavi transcription of the Roman title Caesar. D.M. Dunlop tried to link the Chinese term for Khazars to one of the tribal names of the Uyghur Caucasus, namely the Gisa 2930. The objections are that Uyghur Gisa/Khazar was not a tribal name but rather the surname of the chief of the Sakari tribe of the Caucasus, and that in Middle Chinese the ethnonym Khazars, always prefaced with the word Tija signifying Turk, Tija Ksa with grave bulletin, Tija Hessa, is transcribed with characters different from those used to render the qa in the Uyghur word Khazar. After their conversion it is reported that they adopted the Hebrew script, and it is likely that, though speaking a Turkic language, the Khazar chancellery under Judaism probably corresponded in Hebrew. In Expositio in Mattheum Evangelistum, Khazars are referred to as the Hunnic descendants of Gog and Magog and said to be circumcised and observing all the laws of Judaism. Linguistics. Determining the origins and nature of the Khazars is closely bound with theories of their languages, but it is a matter of intricate difficulty since no indigenous records in the Khazar language survive, and the state itself was polyglot and polyethnic. Whereas the royal or ruling elite probably spoke an eastern variety of Shis Turkic, the subject tribes appear to have spoken varieties of Lur Turkic, such as Auric, a language variously identified with Balearic, Chuvash, and Hungarian, the latter based upon the assertion of the Persian historian Al-Ayakr that the Khazar language was different from any other known tongue. One method for tracing their origins consists in analysis of the possible etymologies behind the ethnonym Khazar itself. History. The tribes that were to comprise the Khazar Empire were not an ethnic union, but a congeries of steppe nomads and peoples who came to be subordinated, and subscribed to a core Turkic leadership. Many Turkic groups, such as the Auric peoples, including Arors, Ars, Onurs, and Bular who earlier formed part of the Til Confederation, are attested quite early, having been driven west by the Sabirs, who in turn fled the Asian Avars, and began to flow into the Volga-Caspian Pontic zone from as early as the 4th century CE and are recorded by Priscus to reside in the western Eurasian steppe elands as early as 463. They appear to stem from Mongolia and South Siberia in the aftermath of the fall of the Hunnic/Xing nomadic polities. A variegated tribal federation led by these Turks, probably comprising a complex assortment of Iranian, Proto-Mongolic, Uralic, and Paleo-Siberian clans, vanquished the Ruran Khaganate of the hegemonic Central Asian Avars in 552 and swept westwards, taking in their train other steppe nomads and peoples from Sogdiana. The ruling family of this confederation may have hailed from the A with Macron Shna with Grave, clan of the West Turkic tribes, though Konstantin Zuckerman regards A with Macron Shna with Grave and their pivotal role in the formation of the Khazars with skepticism. Golden notes that Chinese and Arabic reports are almost identical, making the connection a strong one, and conjectures that their leader may have been Ipshku, Chinese, who lost power or was killed around 651. Moving west, the confederation reached the land of the Akit, Zir, who had been important allies of Byzantium in fighting off Attila's army. Rise of the Khazar state. An embryonic state of Khazaria began to form sometime after 630, when it emerged from the breakdown of the larger Göktürk Khanate. Göktürk armies had penetrated the Volga by 549, ejecting the Avars, who were then forced to flee to the sanctuary of the Hungarian plain. The A with Macron Shna with Grave clan, whose tribal name was Turk, the Strong One, appear on the scene by 552, when they overthrew the Rurans and established the Göktürk Khanate. By 568, these Göktürks were probing for an alliance with Byzantium to attack Persia. An internecine war broke out between the senior Eastern Göktürks and the junior West Turkic Khanate some decades later, when on the death of Taspir Khan, a succession dispute led to a dynastic crisis between Taspir's chosen heir, the Apa Khan, and the ruler appointed by the tribal high council, A with Macron Shna with Grave Shitu, the Ishbara Khan. By the first decades of the 7th century, the A with Macron Shna with Grave Yabgutong managed to stabilize the western division, but upon his death, after providing crucial military assistance to Byzantium in routing the Sasanian army in the Persian heartland, the Western Turkic Khanate dissolved under pressure from the encroaching Tang dynasty armies and split into two competing federations, each consisting of 5 tribes, collectively known as the 10 Arrows, Anak. Both briefly challenged Tang hegemony in eastern Turkestan. To the west, 2 new nomadic states arose in the meantime, Old Great Bulgaria under Kubrat, the Dul clan leader, and the NSHB sub-confederation, also consisting of 5 tribes. The Dul challenged the Avars in the Kuban River Sea of Azov area, while the Khazar Khanate consolidated further westwards, led apparently by an A with Macron Shna with Grave dynasty. With a resounding victory over the tribes in 657, engineered by General Sdngfa with Macron Ng, Chinese overlordship was imposed to their east after a final mop-up operation in 659, but the two confederations of Bular and Khazars fought for supremacy on the western steppe eland, and with the ascendancy of the latter, the former either succumbed to Khazar rule or, as under Asparuk, Kubrat's son, shifted even further west across the Danube to lay the foundations of the Bular state in the Balkans, c. 679. The Khanate of the Khazars thus took shape out of the ruins of this nomadic empire as it broke up under pressure from the Tang dynasty armies to the east sometime between 630 to 650. After their conquest the lower Volga region to the east and an area westwards between the Danube and the Dnieper, and their subjugation of the Onurbalar Union, sometime around 670, a properly constituted Khazar Khanate emerges, becoming the westernmost successor state of the formidable Göktürk Khanate after its disintegration. According to Amal Jan Pritzik, the language of the Onurbalar Federation was to become the lingua franca of Khazaria as it developed into what Lev Gumilev called a steppe Atlantis, steppe Naja Atlantida / The high status soon to be accorded this empire to the north is attested by Ibn al-Bal's Fars Nama, c. 1100, which relates that the Sasanian Shah, Khusravi, Anushirvan, placed 3 thrones by his own, one for the king of China, a second for the king of Byzantium, and a third for the king of the Khazars. Though anachronistic in dating the Khazars to this period, the legend, in placing the Khazar Khan on a throne with equal status to kings of the other 2 superpowers, bears witness to the reputation won by the Khazars from early times. Khazar state, culture and institutions. Khazaria developed a dual kingship governance structure, typical among Turkic nomads, consisting of a Shad/Bak and a Khan. The emergence of this system may be deeply entwined with the conversion to Judaism. According to Arabic sources, the lesser king was called A with circumflex and the greater king Hazarzakan, the former commanded the military, while the greater king's role was primarily sacral, less concerned with daily affairs. The greater king was recruited from the Khazar house of notables, al-Bayt Ma'rfn, and, in an initiation ritual, was nearly strangled until he declared the number of years he wished to reign, on the expiration of which he would be killed by the nobles. The deputy ruler would enter the presence of the reclusive greater king only with great ceremony, approaching him barefoot to prostrate himself in the dust and then light a piece of wood as a purifying fire, while waiting humbly and calmly to be summoned. Particularly elaborate rituals accompanied a royal burial. At one period, travelers had to dismount, bow before the ruler's tomb, and then walk away on foot. Subsequently, the charismatic sovereign's burial place was hidden from view, with a palatial structure, paradise, constructed and then hidden under rerouted river water to avoid disturbance by evil spirits and later generations. Such a royal burial ground, Koruk, is typical of Inner Asian peoples. Both the A with circumflex and the Zakan converted to Judaism sometime in the 8th century, while the rest, according to the Persian traveler Ahmad ibn Rusta, probably followed the old Turkic religion. Ruling elite. The ruling strata, like that of the later Ingasids within the Golden Horde, was a relatively small group that differed ethnically and linguistically from its subject peoples. This is thought to have been the Alano-Az and Auric Turkic tribes, who were numerically superior within Khazaria. The Khazar Khans, while taking wives and concubines from the subject populations, were protected by a Khwarezmian guard corps or comitatus called the Erzaya. But unlike many other local polities, they hired soldiers, mercenaries, the Junud Murdazika in al-Masudi. At the peak of their empire, the Khazars ran a centralized fiscal administration, with a standing army of some 7,000 to 12,000 men, which could, at need, be multiplied 2 or 3 times that number by inducting reserves from their nobles' retinues. Other figures for the permanent standing army indicate that it numbered as many as 100,000. They controlled and exacted tribute from 25 to 30 different nations and tribes inhabiting the vast territories between the Caucasus, the Aral Sea, the Ural Mountains, and the Ukrainian steppes. Khazar armies were led by the Khan Bek, pronounced as Kagan Bek, and commanded by subordinate officers known as Tarkhans. When the Bek sent out a body of troops, they would not retreat under any circumstances. If they were defeated, everyone who returned was killed. Settlements were governed by administrative officials known as tuduns. In some cases, such as the Byzantine settlements in southern Crimea, a tudun would be appointed for a town nominally within another polity's sphere of influence. Other officials in the Khazar government included dignitaries referred to by Ibn Fadlan as Jaishir and Kundar, but their responsibilities are unknown. Demographics. It has been estimated that from 25 to 28 distinct ethnic groups made up the population of the Khazar Khanate, aside from the ethnic elite. The ruling elite seems to have been constituted out of 9 tribes/clans, themselves ethnically heterogeneous, spread over perhaps 9 provinces or principalities, each of which would have been allocated to a clan. In terms of caste or class, some evidence suggests that there was a distinction, whether racial or social is unclear, between white Khazars, aka Khazars, and black Khazars, Kara Khazars. The 10th century Muslim geographer Al-Istiqrar claimed that the white Khazars were strikingly handsome with reddish hair, white skin, and blue eyes, while the black Khazars were swarthy, verging on deep black, as if they were some kind of Indian. Many Turkic nations had a similar, political, not racial, division between a white ruling warrior caste and a black class of commoners. The consensus among mainstream scholars is that Istiqrar was confused by the names given to the two groups. However, Khazars are generally described by early Arab sources as having a white complexion, blue eyes, and reddish hair. The name of the presumed founding A with Macron Shna with Grave clan itself may reflect an etymology suggestive of a darkish color. The distinction appears to have survived the collapse of the Khazarian Empire. Later Russian chronicles, commenting on the role of the Khazars in the Magyarization of Hungary, refer to them as white ogres and Magyars as black ogres. Studies of the physical remains, such as skulls at Sarkel, have revealed a mixture of Slavic, European, and a few Mongolian types. Economy. The import and export of foreign wares, and the revenues derived from taxing their transit, was a key hallmark of the Khazar economy, though it is said also to have produced isinglass. Distinctively among the nomadic steppe polities, the Khazar Khanate developed a self-sufficient domestic economy, a combination of traditional pastoralism, allowing sheep and cattle to be exported, extensive agriculture, abundant use of the Volga's rich fishing stocks, together with craft manufacture, with a diversification in lucrative returns from taxing international trade given its pivotal control of major trade routes. The Khazars constituted one of the two great furnishers of slaves to the Muslim market, the other being the Iranian Samanid emirs, supplying it with captured Slavs and tribesmen from the Eurasian northlands. It was profits from the latter which enabled it to maintain a standard army of Khwarezm Muslim troops. The capital Atil reflected the division, Karazn on the western bank where the king and his Khazar elite, with a retinue of some 4,000 attendants, dwelt, and Idle proper to the east, inhabited by Jews, Christians, Muslims, and slaves and by craftsmen and foreign merchants. The ruling elite wintered in the city and spent from spring to late autumns in their fields. A large irrigated green belt, drawing on channels from the Volga River, lay outside the capital, where meadows and vineyards extended for some 20 farsakhs, ca 60 miles. While customs duties were imposed on traders, and tribute and tithes were exacted from 25 to 30 tribes, with a levy of 1 sable skin, squirrel pelt, sword, dirham per hearth or plowshare, or hides, wax, honey and livestock, depending on the zone. Trade disputes were handled by a commercial tribunal in Atil consisting of 7 judges, 2 for each of the monotheistic inhabitants, Jews, Muslims, Christians, and 1 for the pagans. Khazars and Byzantium. Byzantine diplomatic policy towards the steppe peoples generally consisted of encouraging them to fight among themselves. The Pechenegs provided great assistance to the Byzantines in the 9th century in exchange for regular payments. Byzantium also sought alliances with the Gökturks against common enemies. In the early 7th century, one such alliance was brokered with the Western Turks against the Persian Sasanians in the Byzantine-Sasanian War of 602–628. The Byzantines called Khazariya Turkiya, and by the 9th century refers to the Khazars as Turks. During the period leading up to and after the siege of Constantinople in 626, Heraclius sought help via emissaries, and eventually personally, from a Gökturk chieftain of the western Turkic Khanate, Tanyab Gökhan, in Tiflis, plying him with gifts and the promise of marriage to his daughter, Epiphania. Tongyabgu responded by sending a large force to ravage the Persian Empire, marking the start of the Third Perso-Turkic War. A joint Byzantine-Turk operation breached the Caspian Gates and sacked Derbent in 627. Together they then besieged Tiflis, where the Byzantines used traction trebuchets, lambda pi lambda epsilon iota, to breach the walls, one of their first known uses by the Byzantines. After the campaign, Tongyabgu is reported, perhaps with some exaggeration, to have left some 40,000 troops behind with Heraclius. Though occasionally identified with Khazars, the Göktürk identification is more probable since the Khazars only emerged from that group after the fragmentation of the former sometime after 630. Sasanian Persia never recovered from the devastating defeat wrought by this invasion. Once the Khazars emerged as a power, the Byzantines also began to form alliances, dynastic and military, with them. In 695, the last Heraclian emperor, Justinian II, nicknamed the Slit-Nosed, Iot Nu Tau Muata Tau Omicron, after he was mutilated and deposed, was exiled to Cherson in the Crimea, where a Khazar governor, Tudun, presided. He escaped into Khazar territory in 704 or 705 and was given asylum by Khan Bizir Glavan, Beta Omicron Upsilon Zeta Rho Omicron Gamma Lambda Iota Alpha Beta Nu Omicron, who gave him his sister in marriage, perhaps in response to an offer by Justinian, who may have thought a dynastic marriage would seal by kinship a powerful tribal support for his attempts to regain the throne. The Khazarian spouse thereupon changed her name to Theodora. Bizir was offered a bribe by the Byzantine usurper, Tiberius III, to kill Justinian. Warned by Theodora, Justinian escaped, murdering 2 Khazar officials in the process. He fled to Bulgaria, whose Khan Tervel helped him regain the throne. Upon his reinstallment, and despite Bizir's treachery during his exile, he sent for Theodora. Bizir complied, and she was crowned as Augusta, suggesting that both prized the alliance. Decades later, Leo III, ruled 717 to 741, made a similar alliance to coordinate strategy against a common enemy, the Muslim Arabs. He sent an embassy to the Khazar Khan Bihar and married his son, the future Constantine V, ruled 741 to 775, to Bihar's daughter, a princess referred to as Xäzärlär, in 732. On converting to Christianity, she took the name Irene. Constantine and Irene had a son, the future Leo IV, 775 to 780, who thereafter bore the sobriquet, the Khazar. Leo died in mysterious circumstances after his Athenian wife bore him a son, Constantine VI, who on his majority CO ruled with his mother, the Dowager. He proved unpopular, and his death ended the dynastic link of the Khazars to the Byzantine throne. Citation needed by the 8th century, Khazars dominated the Crimea, 650 c.950, and even extended their influence into the Byzantine peninsula of Cherson until it was wrested back in the 10th century. Khazar and Farganian, Phi Gamma Alpha Nu Omicron Iota, mercenaries constituted part of the imperial Byzantine Hittite bodyguard after its formation in 840, a position that could openly be purchased by a payment of £7 of gold. During the 7th and 8th centuries, the Khazars fought a series of wars against the Umayyad Caliphate and its Abbasid successor. The First Arab-Khazar War began during the first phase of Muslim expansion. By 640, Muslim forces had reached Armenia. In 642 they launched their first raid across the Caucasus under Abdar Rahman ibn Rabia. In 652 Arab forces advanced on the Khazar capital, Balanjar, but were defeated, suffering heavy losses. According to Arab historians such as al-Tabari, both sides in the battle used catapults against the opposing troops. A number of Russian sources give the name of a Khazar Khagan from this period as Irbis and describe him as a scion of the Göktürk royal house, the Ashina. Whether Irbis ever existed is open to debate, as is whether he can be identified with one of the many Göktürk rulers of the same name. Due to the outbreak of the First Muslim Civil War and other priorities, the Arabs refrained from repeating an attack on the Khazars until the early 8th century. The Khazars launched a few raids into Transcaucasian principalities under Muslim dominion, including a large-scale raid in 683–685 during the Second Muslim Civil War that rendered much booty and many prisoners. There is evidence from the account of al-Tabari that the Khazars formed a united front with the remnants of the Göktürks in Transoxiana. Caucasus region, c. 750. The Second Arab-Khazar War began with a series of raids across the Caucasus in the early 8th century. The Umayyads tightened their grip on Armenia in 705 after suppressing a large-scale rebellion. In 713 or 714, Umayyad general Maslama conquered Derbent and drove deeper into Khazar territory. The Khazars launched raids in response into Albania and Iranian Azerbaijan but were driven back by the Arabs under Hassan ibn al-Numan. The conflict escalated in 722 with an invasion by 30,000 Khazars into Armenia inflicting a crushing defeat. Caliph Yazid II responded, sending 25,000 Arab troops north, swiftly driving the Khazars back across the Caucasus, recovering Derbent, and advancing on Balanjar. The Arabs broke through the Khazar defense and stormed the city. Most of its inhabitants were killed or enslaved, but a few managed to flee north. Despite their success, the Arabs had not yet defeated the Khazar army, and they retreated south of the Caucasus. In 724, Arab general al-Jarrah ibn Abdallah al-Hakami inflicted a crushing defeat on the Khazars in a long battle between the rivers Cyrus and Araxes, then moved on to capture Tiflis, bringing Caucasian Iberia under Muslim suzerainty. The Khazars struck back in 726, led by a prince named Barjik, launching a major invasion of Albania and Azerbaijan. By 729, the Arabs had lost control of northeastern Transcaucasia and were thrust again into the defensive. In 730, Barjik invaded Iranian Azerbaijan and defeated Arab forces at Ardabil, killing the general al-Jarrah al-Hakami and briefly occupying the town. Barjik was defeated and killed the next year at Mosul, where he directed Khazar forces from a throne mounted with al-Jarrah's severed head. Arab armies led first by the prince Maslama ibn Abd al-Malik and then by Marwan ibn Muhammad, later Caliph Marwan II, poured across the Caucasus and in 737 defeated a Khazar army led by Xäzärlär Khan, briefly occupying Atil itself. The Khan was forced to accept terms involving conversion to Islam, and to subject himself to the caliphate, but the accommodation was short-lived as a combination of internal instability among the Umayyads and Byzantine support undid the agreement within 3 years, and the Khazars reasserted their independence. The adoption of Judaism by the Khazars, which in this theory would have taken place around 740, may have been part of this reassertion of independence. Whatever the impact of Marwan's campaigns, warfare between the Khazars and the Arabs ceased for more than 2 decades after 737. Arab raids continued until 741, but their control in the region was limited as maintaining a large garrison at Derbent further depleted the already overstretched army. A third Muslim civil war soon broke out, leading to the Abbasid Revolution and the fall of the Umayyad dynasty in 750. In 758, the Abbasid Caliph al-Mansur attempted to strengthen diplomatic ties with the Khazars, ordering Yazid ibn Yazid al-Sulami, one of his nobles and the military governor of Armenia, to take a royal Khazar bride. Yazid married a daughter of Khazar Khagan Baghadar, but she died inexplicably, possibly in childbirth. Her attendants returned home, convinced that some Arab faction had poisoned her, and her father was enraged. Khazar general Ras Tarkhan invaded south of the Caucasus in 762–764, devastating Albania, Armenia, and Iberia, and capturing Tiflis. Thereafter relations became increasingly cordial between the Khazars and the Abbasids, whose foreign policies were generally less expansionist than the Umayyads, broken only by a series of raids in 799 over another failed marriage alliance. By the 9th century, groups of Varangian Rus, developing a powerful warrior merchant system, began probing south down the waterways controlled by the Khazars and their protectorate, the Volga Bulgarians, partially in pursuit of the Arab silver which flowed north for hoarding through the Khazari and Volga-Bulgarian trading zones, partially to trade in furs and ironwork. Northern mercantile fleets passing Atil were tithed, as they were at Byzantine Cherson. Their presence may have prompted the formation of a Rus state by convincing the Slavs, Murja, and the Chud to unite to protect common interests against Khazarian exactions of tribute. It is often argued that a Rus Khaganate modeled on the Khazarian state had formed to the east, and that the Varangian chieftain of the coalition appropriated the title of Khan, Khagan, as early as the 830s. The title survived to denote the princes of Kievan Rus, whose capital, Kiev, is often associated with a Khazarian foundation. The construction of the Sarkal fortress, with technical assistance from Khazaria's Byzantine ally at the time, together with the minting of an autonomous Khazar coinage around the 830s, may have been a defensive measure against emerging threats from Varangians to the north and from the Magyars on the eastern steppe. By 860, the Rus had penetrated as far as Kiev and, via the Dnieper, Constantinople. Alliances often shifted. Byzantium, threatened by Varangian Rus raiders, would assist Khazaria, and Khazaria at times allowed the northerners to pass through their territory in exchange for a portion of the booty. From the beginning of the 10th century, the Khazars found themselves fighting on multiple fronts as nomadic incursions were exacerbated by uprisings by former clients and invasions from former allies. The Pax Khazarica was caught in a pincer movement between steppe Pechenegs and the strengthening of an emergent Rus power to the north, both undermining Khazaria's tributary empire. According to the Schechter text, the Khazar ruler King Benjamin, ca. 880-890 fought a battle against the allied forces of 5 lands whose moves were perhaps encouraged by Byzantium. Though Benjamin was victorious, his son Aaron too faced another invasion, this time led by the Alans, whose leader had converted to Christianity and entered into an alliance with Byzantium, which, under Leo VI the Wise, encouraged them to fight against the Khazars. By the 880s, Khazar control of the middle Dnieper from Kiev, where they collected tribute from eastern Slavic tribes, began to wane as Oleg of Novgorod wrested control of the city from the Varangian warlords Askold and Dir, and embarked on what was to prove to be the foundation of a Rus empire. The Khazars had initially allowed the Rus to use the trade route along the Volga River, and raid southwards. According to al-Masudi, the Khan is said to have given his assent on the condition that the Rus give him half of the booty. In 913, however, 2 years after Byzantium concluded a peace treaty with the Rus, 911, a Varangian foray, with Khazar connivance, through Arab lands led to a request to the Khazar throne by the Khwarezmian Islamic Guard for permission to retaliate against the large Rus contingent on its return. The purpose was to revenge the violence the Rus razzia had inflicted on their fellow Muslim believers. The Rus force was thoroughly routed and massacred. The Khazar rulers closed the passage down the Volga to the Rus, sparking a war. In the early 960s, Khazar ruler Joseph wrote to Hasdai ibn Shaprut about the deterioration of Khazar relations with the Rus. I protect the mouth of the river, idle Volga, and prevent the Rus arriving in their ships from setting off by sea against the Ishmaelites and, equally, all, their, enemies from setting off by land to Bab. The Rus warlords launched several wars against the Khazar Khanate, and raided down to the Caspian Sea. The Schechter letter relates the story of a campaign against Khazaria by HLGW, recently identified as Oleg of Chernigov, around 941, in which Oleg was defeated by the Khazar general Pasuk. The Khazar alliance with the Byzantine Empire began to collapse in the early 10th century. Byzantine and Khazar forces may have clashed in the Crimea, and by the 940s Emperor Constantine VII Porphyrogenitus was speculating into Administrando Imperio about ways in which the Khazars could be isolated and attacked. The Byzantines during the same period began to attempt alliances with the Pechenegs and the Rus, with varying degrees of success. Sviatoslav I finally succeeded in destroying Khazar imperial power in the 960s, in a circular sweep that overwhelmed the Khazar fortresses like Sarkal and Tamotarka, reached as far as the Caucasian Kasajans/Circassians and then back to Kiev. Sarkal fell in 965, with the capital city of Atil following, c. 968 or 969. In the Russian chronicle, the vanquishing of the Khazar traditions is associated with Vladimir's conversion in 986. According to the primary chronicle, in 986 Khazar Jews were present at Vladimir's disputation to decide on the prospective religion of the Kievan Rus. Citation needed. Whether these were Jews who had settled in Kiev or emissaries from some Jewish Khazar remnant state is unclear. Conversion to one of the faiths of the people of Scripture was a precondition to any peace treaty with the Arabs, whose Bulgar envoys had arrived in Kiev after 985. A visitor to Atil wrote soon after the sacking of the city that its vineyards and garden had been razed, that not a grape or raisin remained in the land, and not even alms for the poor were available. An attempt to rebuild may have been undertaken, since Ibn Hawkal and al-Muqaddasi refer to it after that date, but by al-Biruni's time, 1048, it was in ruins. Aftermath, impact, decline, and dispersion. Though Polyak argued that the Khazar kingdom did not wholly succumb to Sviatoslav's campaign, but lingered on until 1224, when the Mongols invaded Rus, by most accounts, the Rusogas campaigns left Khazaria devastated, with perhaps many Khazarian Jews in flight, and leaving behind at best a minor rump state. It left little trace, except for some place names, and much of its population was undoubtedly absorbed in successor hordes. Al-Muqaddasi, writing ca. 985, mentions Khazar beyond the Caspian Sea as a district of woe and squalor, with honey, many sheep, and Jews. Kedarinos mentions a joint Rus-Byzantine attack on Khazaria in 1016, which defeated its ruler Georgius Xäzärlär. The name suggests Christian affiliations. The account concludes by saying, that after Xäzärlär's defeat, the Khazar ruler of Upper Media, Sennacherib, had to sue for peace and submission. In 1024 Mstislav of Chernigov, one of Vladimir's sons, marched against his brother Yaroslav with an army that included Khazars and Kasajans in a repulsed attempt to restore a kind of Khazarian-type dominion over Kiev. Alathir's mention of a raid of Fadlan the Kurd against the Khazars in 1030 CE, in which 10,000 of his men were vanquished by the latter, has been taken, as a reference to such a Khazar remnant, but Barthold identified this Fadlan as Fadl ibn Muhammad and the Khazars as either Georgians or Abkhazians. A Kievian prince named Oleg, grandson of Jaroslav, was reportedly kidnapped by Khazars in 1079 and shipped off to Constantinople, although most scholars believe that this is a reference to the Cumans, Kipchuks or other steppe peoples then dominant in the Pontic region. Upon his conquest of Tmutarakan in the 1080s, Oleg Sviatoslavic, son of a prince of Chernigov, gave himself the title Archon of Khazaria. In 1083 Oleg is said to have exacted revenge on the Khazars after his brother Roman was killed by their allies, the Polovtsi/Cumans. After one more conflict with these Polovtsi in 1106, the Khazars fade from history. By the end of the 12th century, Petakia of Ratisbon reported traveling through what he called Khazaria, and had little to remark on other than describing its minim, sectaries, living amidst desolation in perpetual mourning. The reference seems to be to Karaites. The Franciscan missionary William of Rudbruck likewise found only impoverished pastures in the lower Volga area where Ital once lay. Giovanni de Pian del Carpine, the papal legate to the court of the Mongol Khan Gayuk at that time, mentioned an otherwise unattested Jewish tribe, the Brutaki, perhaps in the Volga region. Though connections are made to the Khazars, the link is based merely on a common attribution of Judaism. The 10th century Zoroastrian Denkard registered the collapse of Khazar power in attributing its eclipse to the enfeebling effects of false religion. The decline was contemporary to that suffered by the Transoxiana Smnid Empire to the east, both events paving the way for the rise of the Great Seljuk Empire, whose founding traditions mention Khazar connections. Whatever successor entity survived, it could not longer function as a bulwark against the pressure east and south of nomad expansions. By 1043, Kimyks and Kipchaks, thrusting westwards, pressured the Uz, who in turn pushed the Pechenegs west towards Byzantium's Balkan provinces. Khazaria nonetheless left its mark on the rising states and some of their traditions and institutions. Much earlier, Xäzärlär, the Khazar wife of Leo III, introduced into the Byzantine court the distinctive kaftan or riding habit of the nomadic Khazars, the Tsitsakian, tau zeta iota tau zeta kappa iota omicron nu, and this was adopted as a solemn element of imperial dress. The orderly hierarchical system of succession by scales, lest Vishna systema, to the Grand Principate of Kiev was arguably modeled on Khazar institutions, via the example of the Rus Khaganate. The Proto-Hungarian Pontic tribe, while perhaps threatening Khazaria as early as 839, Sarkal, developed its institutional models, such as the dual rule of a ceremonial Kendkundu and a Gyaola administering practical and military administration, under Khazar tutelage. A dissident group of Khazars, the Khazars, joined the Hungarians in their flight from the Pechenegs as they moved into Pannonia. Elements within the Hungarian population can be viewed as perpetuating Khazar traditions as a successor state. Byzantine sources refer to Hungary as Western Turkey in contrast to Khazaria, Eastern Turkey. The Gyaola line produced the kings of medieval Hungary through descent from Arpad, while the Khazars retained their traditions longer, and were known as Black Hungarians, Fakit Magyar Szag. Some archaeological evidence from Ilareva suggests the Khazars practiced Judaism since warrior graves with Jewish symbols were found there, including menorahs, shofars, etrogs, lulavs, candle snuffers, ash collectors, inscriptions in Hebrew, and a six-pointed star identical to the Star of David. The Khazar state was the only Jewish state to rise between the fall of the Second Temple, 67 to 70 CE, and the establishment of Israel, 1948, and its example stimulated messianic aspirations for a return to Israel as early as Judah Halevi. In the time of the Egyptian vizier Al-Afdal Shahan Shah, d. 1121, one Solomon ben Duji, often identified as a Khazarian Jew, attempted to stir up a messianic effort for the liberation of, and return of all Jews to, Palestine. He wrote to many Jewish communities to enlist support. He eventually moved to Kurdistan, where his son Menachem some decades later assumed the title of Messiah and, raising an army for this purpose, took the fortress of Ahmadiyya north of Mosul. His project was opposed by the rabbinical authorities and he was poisoned in his sleep. One theory maintains that the Star of David, until then a decorative motif or magical emblem, began to assume its national value in late Jewish tradition from its earlier symbolic use by Menachem. The word Khazar, as an ethnonym, was last used in the 13th century by a people in the North Caucasus believed to practice Judaism. The nature of a hypothetical Khazar diaspora, Jewish or otherwise, is disputed. Avraham ibn Dud mentions encountering rabbinical students descended from Khazars as far away as Toledo, Spain in the 1160s. Khazar communities persisted here and there. Many Khazar mercenaries served in the armies of the Islamic caliphates and other states. Documents from medieval Constantinople attest to a Khazar community mingled with the Jews of the suburb of Pera. Khazar merchants were active in both Constantinople and Alexandria in the 12th century. Religion. Direct sources for Khazar religion are not many, but in all likelihood they originally practiced a traditional Turkic form of cultic practices known as Tengriism, which focused on the sky god Tengri. Something of its nature may be deduced from what we know of the rites and beliefs of contiguous tribes, such as the North Caucasian Huns. Horse sacrifices were made to the supreme deity. Rites involved offerings to fire, water, and the moon, to remarkable creatures, and to gods of the road, cf. Old Turkil Tengri, perhaps a god of fortune. Sun amulets were widespread as cultic ornaments. A tree cult was also maintained. Whatever was struck by lightning, man, or object, was considered a sacrifice to the high god of heaven. The afterlife, to judge from excavations of aristocratic tumuli, was much a continuation of life on earth, warriors being interred with their weapons, horses, and sometimes with human sacrifices. The funeral of one Tudran in 711-12 saw 300 soldiers killed to accompany him to the other world. Ancestor worship was observed. The key religious figure appears to have been a shamanizing Qam, and it was these, Khazmim, that were, according to the Hazar Hebrew conversion stories, driven out. Many sources suggest, and a notable number of scholars have argued, that the charismatic A with Macron Shna with Grave clan played a germinal role in the early Hazar state, though Zuckerman dismisses the widespread notion of their pivotal role as a phantom. The A with Macron Shna with Grave were closely associated with the Tengri cult, whose practices involved rites performed to assure a tribe of heaven's protective providence. The Khan was deemed to rule by virtue of Kut, the heavenly mandate/good fortune to rule. Judaism. The conversion of Khazars to Judaism, though doubts persist, is reported overwhelmingly by external sources and in the Khazar correspondence, Hebrew documents whose authenticity was long doubted and challenged, but specialists now widely accept them either as authentic or as reflecting internal Khazar traditions. Archaeological evidence for conversion, on the other hand, remains elusive, and may reflect either the incompleteness of excavations, or that the stratum of actual adherence was thin. Conversion of steppe or peripheral tribes to a universal religion is fairly well attested phenomenon, and the Khazar conversion to Judaism, though unusual, was not unique. Moshkil is almost a lone voice in arguing the conversion never took place. On Khazaria's southern flank, both Islam and Byzantine Christianity were proselytizing great powers. Byzantine success in the north was sporadic, though Armenian and Albanian missions from Derbent built churches extensively in maritime Dagestan, then a Khazar district. Buddhism also had exercised an attraction on leaders of both the eastern, 552 to 742, and western Khanates, 552 to 659, the latter being the progenitor of the Khazar state. In 682, according to the Armenian chronicle of Muvsas das Suranai, the king of Caucasian Albania, Varazturdad, dispatched a bishop Israel to convert Caucasian Huns who were subject to the Khazars, and managed to bring Alp Ilutyr, a son-in-law of the Khazar Khan, and his army, to abandon their shamanizing cults and join the Christian fold. The Arab Georgian martyr St. Abio, who converted to Christianity within the Khazar kingdom around 779-80, describes local Khazars as irreligious. Some reports register a Christian majority at Samandiyar, or Muslim in various areas of Khazaria. Also Jews from both the Islamic world and Byzantium are known to have migrated to Khazaria during periods of persecution under Heraclius, Justinian II, Leo III, and Romanus Lapkanos. For Simon Schama, Jewish communities from the Balkans and the Bosphorus Crimea, especially from Pantikapaeum, began migrating to the more hospitable climate of pagan Khazaria in the wake of these persecutions, and were joined there by Jewish refugees from Armenia. The Geniza fragments, he argues, make it clear the Judaizing reform sent roots down into the whole of the population. The pattern is one of an elite conversion preceding large-scale adoption of the new religion by the general population, which often resisted the imposition. One important condition for mass conversion was a settled urban state, where churches, synagogues, or mosques provided a focus for religion, as opposed to the free nomadic lifestyle of life on the open steppes. A tradition of the Iranian Judeo-Tats claims that their ancestors were responsible for the Khazar conversion. Both the date of the conversion, and the extent of its influence beyond the elite, often minimized in scholarship, are a matter of dispute, but at some point between 740 CE and 920 CE, the Khazar royalty and nobility appear to have converted to Judaism, in part, it is argued, perhaps to deflect competing pressures from Arabs and Byzantines to accept either Islam or Orthodoxy. Christian of Stavelot in his Expositio in Mattheum Evangelistum, ca. 860-870s, refers to them as descendants of Gog and Magog, who were circumcised and observed all the laws of Judaism. New numismatic evidence of coins dated 837/8 bearing the inscriptions are Al-Azar, land of the Khazars, or Musa Rasul Allah, Moses the messenger of God, in imitation of the Islamic coin phrase, Muhammad Rasul Allah, suggest to many the conversion took place in that decade. Olson argues that the 837/8 evidence marks only the beginning of a long and difficult official Judaization that concluded some decades later. Another view holds that by the 10th century, while the royal clan officially claimed Judaism, a non-normative variety of Islamization took place among the majority of Khazars. By the 10th century, the letter of King Joseph asserts that, after the royal conversion, Israel returned, Yashavu Yisrael, with the people of Khazaria, to Judaism, in complete repentance, by Teshuvah Shalema. Persian historian Ibn al-Faqih wrote that all the Khazars are Jews, but they have been Judaized recently. Ibn Fadlan, based on his caliphal mission, 921-922, to the Volga-Don, also reported that the core element of the state, the Khazars, were Judaized, something underwritten by the Karaite scholar Yaqub Kirkazani around 937. The conversion appears to have occurred against a background of frictions arising from both an intensification of Byzantine missionary activity in from the Crimea to the Caucasus, and Arab attempts to wrest control over the latter in the 8th century CE, and a revolt, put down, by the Khazars around the mid-9th century is often invoked as in part influenced by their refusal to accept Judaism. Modern scholars generally see the conversion as a slow process through 3 stages, which accords with Richard Eaton's model of syncretic inclusion, gradual identification and, finally, displacement of the older tradition. Sometime between 954 and 961, Hasdai ibn Shaprite wrote a letter of inquiry addressed to the ruler of Khazaria, and received a reply from Joseph of Khazaria. The exchanges of this Khazar correspondence, together with the Schechter letter discovered in the Cairo Geniza and the famous Platonizing dialogue by Judah Halevi, Sefer HaKuzari, the Khazar, which plausibly drew on such sources, provide us with the only direct evidence of the indigenous traditions concerning the conversion. King Bulan is said to have driven out the sorcerers, and to have received angelic visitations exhorting him to find the true religion, upon which, accompanied by his vizier, he traveled to desert mountains of Warsan on a seashore, where he came across a cave rising from the plain of Tyul in which Jews used to celebrate the Sabbath. Here he was circumcised. Bulan is then said to have convened a royal debate between exponents of the 3 Abrahamic religions. He decided to convert when he was convinced of Judaism's superiority. Many scholars situate the c740 CE, a date supported by Halevi's own account. The details are both Judaic and Turkic. A Turkic ethnogonic myth speaks of an ancestral cave in which the A with macron shna with grave were conceived from the mating of their human ancestor and a wolf ant's stress. These accounts suggest that there was a rationalizing syncretism of native pagan traditions with Jewish law, by melding through the motif of the cave, a site of ancestral ritual and repository of forgotten sacred texts, Turkic myths of origin and Jewish notions of redemption of Israel's fallen people. It is generally agreed they adopted rabbinical rather than Karaite Judaism. Ibn Fadlan reports that the settlement of disputes in Khazaria was adjudicated by judges hailing each from his community, be it Christian, Jewish, Muslim, or pagan. Some evidence suggests that the Khazar king saw himself as a defender of Jews even beyond the kingdom's frontiers, retaliating against Muslim or Christian interests in Khazaria in the wake of Islamic and Byzantine persecutions of Jews abroad. Ibn Fadlan recounts specifically an incident in which the king of Khazaria destroyed the minaret of a mosque in Atil as revenge for the destruction of a synagogue in Dar al-Babunaj, and allegedly said he would have done worse were it not for a fear that the Muslims might retaliate in turn against Jews. Hasdai ibn Shaprite sought information on Khazaria in the hope he might discover a place on this earth where harassed Israel can rule itself, and wrote that, were to prove it true that Khazaria had such a king, he would not hesitate to forsake his high office and his family in order to emigrate there. Abraham Harkavi noted in 1877 that an Arabic commentary on Isaiah 48:14, variously ascribed to Saadia Jayan or to the Karaite scholar Benjamin Nahawandi, interpreted the Lord hath loved him as a reference to the Khazars, who will go and destroy Babel, i.e., Babylonia, a name used to designate the country of the Arabs. This has been taken as an indication of hopes by Persian Jews that the Khazars might overthrow the Caliphate. Islam. In 965, as the Khanate was struggling against the victorious campaign of the Rus prince Sviatoslav, the Islamic historian Ibn al-Athir mentions that Hazaria, attacked by the Uz, sought help from Khwarezm, but their appeal was rejected because they were regarded as infidels, al-Kufr pagans. Save for the king, the Hazarians are said to have converted to Islam in order to secure an alliance, and the Turks were, with Khwarezm's military assistance, repelled. It was this that, according to Ibn al-Athir, led the Jewish king of Khazar to convert to Islam. Claims of Khazar ancestry. Khazar origins for, or suggestions Khazars were absorbed by many peoples, have been made regarding the Slavic Judaizing Subotniks, the Bukharan Jews, the Muslim Kumyks, Kazakhs. No guy citation needed. The Cossacks of the Don region, the Turkic-speaking Krimchaks and their Crimean neighbors the Karaites to the Moldavian Ksangos, the Mountain Jews and others. Turkic-speaking Crimean Karaites, known in the Crimean Tatar language as Xäzärlär, some of whom migrated in 19th century from Crimea to Poland and Lithuania, have claimed Khazar origins. Specialists in Khazar history question the connection. Scholarship is likewise skeptical of claims that the Tatar-speaking Krimchak Jews of the Crimea descend from Khazars. Ashkenazi Khazar theories. Several scholars have suggested that the Khazars did not disappear after the dissolution of their empire, but migrated west to eventually form part of the core of the later Ashkenazi Jewish population of Europe. This hypothesis is greeted with skepticism or caution by most scholars. Abraham Eliyahu Harkavi then suggested as early as 1869 that there might be a link between the Khazars and European Jews, but the theory that Khazar converts formed a major proportion of Ashkenazi was first proposed to a Western public in a lecture by Ernest Renan in 1883. Occasional suggestions emerged that there was a small Khazar component in East European Jews in works by Joseph Jacobs, 1886, Anatole Leroy-Beaulieu, a critic of anti-Semitism, 1893, Maximilian Ernest Gumplaues, and by the Russian Jewish anthropologist Samuel Weissenberg. In 1909 Hugo von Kutzschera developed the notion into a book-length study, arguing Khazars formed the foundational core of the modern Ashkenazi. Maurice Fishberg introduced the notion to American audiences in 1911. The idea was also taken up by the Polish Jewish economic historian and general Zionist Yitzhak Skipper in 1918. Scholarly anthropologists, such as Roland B. Dixon, 1923, and writers like H. G. Wells, 1921, used it to argue that the main part of Jewry never was in Judea, a thesis that was to have a political echo in later opinion. In 1932, Samuel Krauss ventured the theory that the biblical Ashkenaz referred to northern Asia Minor, and identified it with the Khazars, a position immediately disputed by Jacob Mann. 10 years later, in 1942, Abraham N. Polyak, later professor for the history of the Middle Ages at Tel Aviv University, published a Hebrew monograph in which he concluded that the East European Jews came from Khazaria. D.M. Dunlop, writing in 1954, thought very little evidence backed what he regarded as a mere assumption, and argued that the Ashkenazi Khazar descent theory went far beyond what our imperfect records permit. Leon Polyakov, while assuming the Jews of Western Europe resulted from apanmixia in the first millennium, asserted in 1955 that it was widely assumed that Europe's Eastern Jews descended from a mixture of Khazarian and German Jews. Polyak's work found some support in Salo Whitmayer Baron and Benzion Diner, but was dismissed by Bernard Weinrib as a fiction, 1962. The Khazar Ashkenazi hypothesis came to the attention of a much wider public with the publication of Arthur Koestler's The 13th Tribe in 1976, which was both positively reviewed and dismissed as a fantasy, and a somewhat dangerous one. Israel's ambassador to Britain branded it an anti-Semitic action financed by the Palestinians, while Bernard Lewis claimed that the idea was not supported by any evidence whatsoever, and had been abandoned by all serious scholars. Raphael Patai, however, registered some support for the idea that Khazar remnants had played a role in the growth of Eastern European Jewish communities, and several amateur researchers, such as Boris Altshuler, 1994, and Kevin Allen Brooke, kept the thesis in the public eye. The theory has been occasionally manipulated to deny Jewish nationhood. Recently, a variety of approaches, from linguistics, Paul Wexler, to historiography, Shlomo Sand, and population genetics, Aaron L. Hike, a geneticist from the University of Sheffield, have emerged to keep the theory alive. In broad academic perspective, both the idea that the Khazars converted en masse to Judaism, and the suggestion they emigrated to form the core population of Ashkenazi Jewry, remain highly polemical issues. One thesis held that the Khazar Jewish population went into a northern diaspora and had a significant impact on the rise of Ashkenazi Jews. Connected to this thesis is the theory, expounded by Paul Wexler, that the grammar of Yiddish contains a Khazar substrate. Use in anti-Semitic polemics. Maurice Fishberg and Roland B. Dixon's works were later exploited in racist and religious polemical literature in both Britain, in British Israelism, and the United States. Particularly after the publication of Burton J. Hendricks' The Jews in America, 1923. It began to enjoy a vogue among advocates of immigration restriction in the 1920s, racial theorists like Lothrop Stoddard, anti-Semitic conspiracy theorists like the Ku Klux Klan's Hiram Wesley Evans, anti-communist polemicists like John O. Beatty and Wilmot Robertson, whose views influenced David Duke. According to Yehoshaphat Harkabi, 1968, and others, it played a role in Arab anti-Zionist polemics, and took on an anti-Semitic edge. Bernard Lewis, noting in 1987 that Arab scholars had dropped it, remarked that it only occasionally emerged in Arab political discourse. It has also played some role in Soviet anti-Semitic chauvinism and Slavic Eurasian historiography, particularly in the works of scholars like Lev Gumilev. Although the Khazar hypothesis never played any major role in anti-Semitism, and though the existence of a Jewish kingdom north of the Caucasus had formerly long been denied by Christian religious commentators, it came to be exploited by the white supremacist Christian movement and even by terrorist esoteric cults like Aum Shinrikhi. Genetic studies. The hypothesis of Khazarian ancestry in Ashkenazi has also been a subject of discussion in the new field of population genetics, wherein claims have been made concerning evidence both for and against it. The general conclusion is that, if traces of descent from Khazars exist in the Ashkenazi gene pool, the contribution would be quite minor, or insignificant. Aaron L. Hike argued in 2012 for a significant Khazar component in the paternal line based on the study of Y-DNA of Ashkenazi Jews, using Caucasian populations, Georgians, Armenians, and Azerbaijani Jews as proxies. According to Nadia Abu el-Hajj, the issues of origins are generally complicated by the difficulties of writing history via genome studies and the biases of emotional investments in different narratives, depending on whether the emphasis lies on direct descent or on conversion within Jewish history. The lack of Khazar DNA samples that might allow verification also presents difficulties. Crimean Karaite claims. In 1846, the Russian Orientalist Vasily Vasilyevich Grigorev, 1816–1881, theorized that the Crimean Karaites were of Khazar stock, an allegation quickly taken up outsiders though unfamiliar to the Karaites themselves at the time. Today many Karaims deny Israelite origins and consider themselves to be descendants of the Khazars. Specialists in Khazar history question the connection. Genetics. Leon Kull and Kevin Allen Brooke led the first scientific study of Crimean Karaites using genetic testing of both Y-chromosomal DNA and mitochondrial DNA, and the results showed that Crimean Karaites are indeed partially of Middle Eastern origin and related to other Jews. In literature, the Cosri is an influential work written by the medieval Spanish Jewish philosopher and poet Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, c. 1075–1141. Divided into 5 essays, Ma'amarim, it takes the form of a fictional dialogue between the pagan king of the Khazars and a Jew who was invited to instruct him in the tenets of the Jewish religion. The intent of the work, although based on Hazde ibn Shaprit's correspondence with the Khazar king, was not historical, but rather to defend Judaism as a revealed religion, written in the context, firstly of Karaite challenges to the Spanish rabbinical intelligentsia, and then against temptations to adapt Aristotelianism and Islamic philosophy to the Jewish faith. Originally written in Arabic, it was translated into Hebrew by Judah ibn Taban. Benjamin Disraeli's early novel El Roi, 1833, draws on Menachem ben Solomon's story. The question of mass religious conversion and the indeterminability of the truth of stories about identity and conversion are central themes of Milorad Pavik's best-selling mystery story dictionary of the Khazars. H.N. Turtletub's Justinian, Marek Halter's Book of Abraham and Wind of the Khazars, and Michael Chabon's Gentlemen of the Road allude to or feature elements of Khazar history or create fictional Khazar characters. Cities associated with the Khazars: Atil, Hazaran, Sama-Ndar, in the Caucasus, Balanjar, Khazarki, Sambalug, and Samiran, in Crimea and the Taman region, Kerch, Theodosia, Yevpatoria, Guzliev, Samkarsh, also called Tmutarakan, Tamatarka, and Sudak. In the Don Valley Circle. A number of Khazar settlements have been discovered in the Malyakis-Altovo region. Some scholars suppose that the Khazar settlement of Sambat on the Dnieper refers to the later Kiev.